Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Icarus and hopefully the street's going to be quiet outside. I am in the master bedroom that I've been working on and you're actually going to see footage of me working on the mural. I do not want to talk about the mural for however long this video ends up being. So instead, I'm going to talk about what I was thinking about while I was painting the mural. And if there is any background noise, I'm going to try and dim it as much as possible. But we still haven't turned the electricity back on in this room, so I am not. I have the windows open essentially, and this is a surprisingly noisy street when the windows are all open. Anyway, so when I've been working on the mural, I've been listening to the Depp v. Heard case, and I talked about this in the last video. I do have the video for Whipping Girl Chapter 9 up and coming. I have everything written out. I just have to record it and post it. And today, Thursday, May 26th, they finished giving all the testimony and all the evidence. Closing statements are tomorrow. The jury is going to deliberate, and hopefully they have the answer sometime next week, if not sooner. Some people are saying it's going to be sooner. I don't know. But I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been reading a lot online. I've been looking at a lot of websites and articles from places that I would usually trust, talking about how this is a tragedy for Me Too movement, for women's rights, for victims of domestic violence. And that's all from sources I would usually very much trust, which is annoying is a good way to say it, or disheartening is another good way to say it. It's a puzzle to me, I suppose, and that's why I'm making this video. And I have mostly stayed off of media sites, but I needed to finally get an outlet to talk about this sort of thing, because I'd mostly been talking about it to Briar, and Briar can only take so much of that before their head wants to pop. So I made a temporary blog to talk about it, and I would tag it and there would be some responses. So I went into the responses and into those blogs, and I noticed a lot of tendencies between the two camps that have sort of been formed around this trial. I mean, what do you expect? It is a two-person trial. Of course there's going to be camps. And it's America. That's all I can say about that. It's America. We have a two-party system. So, really, what do I expect? George Washington didn't want there to be a two-party system, but Lord, everything's black and white. And I think that's the biggest problem for me, is a lot of the people that are coming from either side, honestly, but majority from what I have personally seen, it is mostly the Amber Heard defenders. I'm not going to call them stans. I'm not going to call them fanatics or any derogatory names. They are in defense of Amber Heard. They believe Amber Heard. And they believe that all of this going on is a really huge step back for the Me Too movement, for domestic violence against women, that sort of thing. And to a lesser degree, I also see that from Johnny Depp's side, not with the Me Too movement dying out or anything like that. And I'm not talking about right-wing bullshit, because, I mean, right-wingers, conservatives, people who don't give a shit about domestic violence or think that it's all a hoax, people who are like that, they already had cases that showed that women are willing to lie about domestic violence or sexual assault allegations for their own benefit in some shape or form. And this is just a machismo, I don't know, the cherry on top of their shit sundae of, see, people lie. It doesn't matter to them that the amount of people that have lied are grossly outnumbered by the amount of people that don't lie or that don't come forward or who get bullied by their abusers to not do anything. And it's just like men's right activists, red pills, incels, that whole QAnon group, all of that shit. It's just like them to latch onto movements that are actually important and should be discussed in feminist circles, but because they are under discussed in feminist circles, they can latch onto these, and now suddenly we can't talk about men's rights or how they're hurt by the patriarchy or any of that because there's no space in feminist circles. And when you try to make a space, they just say that you are an MRA and a misogynist and try to toss you out. And that has a lot of overlap, I've noticed, with the transandrophobia shit too. The biggest argument against anyone who wants to talk about transandrophobia is that you're a trans misogynist, especially if you are a person who is pointing out some of the ways that trans women or trans feminine people will hurt trans masculine aligned people, whether intentionally or not. And yeah, it's this huge black and white divide, and no one wants to admit that there's muddy grays, or if there are people willing to admit there's the muddy grays, that both of these people suck in different ways, but this is a specific trial for a specific thing. It is people who are, by and large, on Johnny Depp's side. And I think that says something about it. I think it says something that a lot of the pro Amber Heard blogs and the Amber Heard defenders that I'm seeing are also generally radical feminists and generally more towards rad fem than they are intersexual feminism, or maybe they're a little bit lib fem, but not so much so that it makes a notable difference. Because I think we can all agree that out of the three feminist movements that came out of Second Wave feminism, lib fem is maybe the most lip-wristed. It is the lib fem is pretty weak, and I don't even consider it a form of feminism, because essentially lib fem right now is just like, oh, everything is better now, whatever. But I have noticed a trend towards the Amber Heard defenders to be extremely caustic towards men in general. They're the ones that are saying this single case is setting back movements that are basically dead. If you look at the Google Trends back, they grasp onto anything they can in a very similar way that I feel the actual trial has Amber Heard's team grasping at straws. And I want to detour into this for a second. The thing about expert witnesses you have to realize is that all the expert witnesses are paid by their side to say essentially what that side wants. Now, that's not entirely how it goes, but that's pretty much the crux of it. So you can approach 10 different psychologists and say, hey, look at Amber Heard. Do you think she has PTSD? And psychologist 1 through 9, they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with this case. You can't pay me enough, etc., etc. Or they give a tentative feedback. Maybe there's a consultation fee, and they're like, these are my findings. They look at the findings and they're like, I don't like these findings. We're not going to put this deposition in, and go on to number 10, Dr. Hughes. And Dr. Hughes is like, yeah, I see this. And they pay Dr. Hughes to come in to stand. Same thing with Johnny Depp's side. They probably went and talked to a dozen different psychologists. They probably looked at psychologists who specialize in PTSD, and they're like, look at this case and tell me what you think. And psychologists 1 through 11 are like, you can't pay me enough, or their tentative findings weren't what they wanted to say. And then Dr. Curry is like, yeah, from what I'm seeing, from what you're telling me, this is maybe what I want to do. this is how I would approach it. And they're like, we like you, we're going to pay you. They paid her, she did all her stuff, and they liked her testimony, so they kept her deposition and they had her testify. Same thing with the other expert witnesses, the entertainment experts, for example. Depp's side had Richard Marx. The Heard side had Arnold. And they probably went to a couple dozen, or maybe because Johnny Depp has connections in the entertainment industry, he was like, I know who I want Richard Marx. And they paid these different people to start giving their findings, and maybe there were a handful that were like, no, I'm not going to do this isn't worth it. Or maybe they had a handful that were like, here are my findings, and they started to go through the depo process, and they're like, you know what, no, you're not worth it, we're going to throw out your deposition, it's not what we want to hear. And then they ended up with Richard Marx, or Richard Max, I don't know, that guy who apparently has made everything, and Miss Arnold, who, to be honest, seems to know less than some of the more fun YouTubers I listen to for horror movie reviews, and so on and so forth. So you are seeing experts testify to what they believe is the truth, and the bias comes in the fact that they were paid by a side, and that side decided that they liked their testimony enough, their findings enough, to present it to the jury. So it's not necessarily the experts themselves are biased, though in Dr. Hugh's case I definitely would say so, but it's more that the people who are putting them on the stand are biased, which is understandable because it's Johnny Depp's team putting them on the stand. It's Amber Heard's team putting them on the stand. You get into some crazy shit with like Dr. Hughes. I really do think that she ended up being completely biased towards Amber Heard. And one of the things that came out today is that she was talking about the psychology as a clinician instead of a forensic psychologist. So in clinical psychology, some of the tests that she used and she administered in the way she did may have been fine for clinical psychology, but as a forensic psychologist, she's held to a different standard. And she didn't dot her I's and cross her T's, and that's what got her in trouble with Dr. Curry during the rebuttal, and she came back on, Dr. Hughes came back on today, and she was mad. That's all I can say about that, is that she sounded angry and defensive, and she was speaking too fast for my slow southern mind, and I can't really say anything else about that because that's going into the weeds. But closing is going to be tomorrow. But Johnny Depp and Amber Heard both came up in their respective rebuttals, which was a surprise to me for both of them. I didn't think either of them really should take the stand again, especially Amber, because she did not come across very well on the initial testimony she gave when she started stating her case. But she took the stand again, and both of them kind of gave good emotional appeals, in my opinion. Amber Heard's side was 100% emotional appeal because she was trying to give... So Amber Heard's side sounded a lot more like emotional appeal because she was supposed to be giving a rebuttal against the Waldman statements, which her countersuit is resting on. And she kind of talked about generally how all of these things were affecting her. She talked about the death threats that she's been receiving. She talked about the emotional and mental abuse from the public that she's been receiving. She straight up said, I wrote the op-ed because I know Johnny Depp has this sort of power over people. So she admitted that the op-ed is directly about him. And I don't think the jury's going to miss that because that's one of the last things that have been said outside of closing arguments. And honestly, if that doesn't come up in closing, that's going to be a huge mistake in my opinion. And to continue on, because I'm still going a bit in the weeds, the cross got opened up a lot, which was huge. And Amber Heard did not come across very well. I've been only listening to most of the case. Are you serious? Cool, I'm in a different room now because they decided that somebody needed to open their car door and play music very loudly. So, as I was saying, Amber Heard just generally didn't come across looking good, and there's so many holes in her story that it's hard to explain. I came into this trial believing Amber Heard. I had some doubts because it's hard not to see some of the back and forth when the trial first started, because I didn't start paying attention until about week 3. And then I kept listening to the testimony. I caught up to where it was at, and I listened to Johnny Depp's side, and I was like, cool. So I know I'm biased right now because Johnny Depp put on his case first. And his case went to rest. They did the motion to strike, which of course didn't go through because it's just a formality. And then they went on to Amber Heard's case, and Dr. Hughes testified. And I talked about that. I don't like her testimony because it was just so bad and biased, and even as a layman, it felt like an attack on men generally. Even cases where she talked about same-sex abuse, it was male-on-male abuse, very stereotypical PE teacher and student, or priest and kid, and that sort of thing, and it was bad. Then Amber Heard took the stand, and it felt like everything fell apart. And you learn that she didn't turn over the original metadata, and she had a computer forensic guy come up and try and talk about the metadata and how Apple systems work. But then during cross, he was just like, yeah, I can't say whether these are the originals or not, that sort of thing. I can't really talk about it. And same thing with the digital forensic expert on Depp's side. He was like, I can see that these have changed, but these are backups of backups and backups. They're not the originals. And he showed how some of the photos that have been submitted were basically the same ones, but the saturation or the sharpness have been messed with a bit, which makes the shadows and everything on her face and the redness more prominent. But she kept making these huge statements about a man who wears heavy rings beating her bloody. And then the next day she goes on the James Corden show. And yes, makeup can hide a lot. Heavy makeup can hide a ton, but it wouldn't hide swelling. Ice wouldn't make all the swelling down to your normal face shape. It wouldn't hide a lip that's constantly splitting, or it wouldn't make the pain of scrunching your nose up and opening your mouth wide not hurt. So I've gone into this and I'm seeing the fear-mongering coming out from the liberal and more leftist side of things, and it's like this probably isn't going to have the effect that you think it has. You are trying to put someone who used her high profile relationship to kind of put herself on a pedestal she didn't belong on. That's the long and short of it. She kind of lied her way as representative of the ACLU and the Me Too movement. And to me, at least, she wasn't a really big part of it. I don't remember her very much of at all when I was adjacent to all of that. But she still lied her way to that position. She pledged to donate all of her money, and the ACLU, most if not all of the donation that she gave was through other people under her name. And the children's hospital she pledged to donate to, she didn't even give a full year's worth if she's going to donate over the course of 10 years. And she talks about how she couldn't donate it because she got hit with a lawsuit, but she had 28 months from the start of when she got paid the $7 million from Depp to when the lawsuit was filed against her. She had 13 months from the last payment of the $7 million to when she got the lawsuit. So she had that money in the bank, and she didn't really donate anything since like 2016, 2017, before she wrote the op-ed. She didn't even sign a pledge with the ACLU that they put together for her. So she's a documented liar. And she also, in her closing testimony, talked about how Johnny dragged her through 2 suits already. This is her 2nd suit or whatever. And that wasn't true either. That was the NGN calling her as a defense witness, which, unless they subpoenaed her, she really didn't have to do, from what I understand. So that's another lie. And Johnny doesn't come out looking great either. He downplayed a lot of his drug use, and I think he didn't talk so much about the verbal arguments that they would get in. He would emphasize the fact that he would try and run away, which, fair, okay, you did try to do that. But on the other hand, you aren't really being completely honest about the full measure of what's going on. But Amber Heard did so much worse because she had all these audio tapes. Like, she talks about how there's a mountain of evidence against Depp, and that is really unusual in domestic violence cases. I mean, this is a defamation case, but it's arguably a civil way of saying civil litigation version of a domestic violence case, because most of the stuff is out of time, that sort of thing. You can't bring a criminal case against either of them now. But she is saying stuff like, I have this mountain of evidence. I record it from the beginning. And then you look at her evidence and you see photos that show her face when she's showing an arm bruise after she says that she was attacked. And there's no makeup on her face, and her face looks normal when she talked about spraying blood across the wall. She has photos of these very light bruises that don't look anything like, maybe they're bruises, or maybe they're just like she's tired, or the way that her cheek implants go out create shadows on her face. I noticed that a lot in court, is that with the overhead lighting, the shadows that her cheek implants make her cheeks look bruised. Or she has photos that she claims are 2 different photos with just 2 different light setups, but they are clearly the exact same. Like, even the hair is in the same place, and you overlap them and you can see that. And this is a jury that is mostly of younger people, so even if some of the older people come into the actual final, because only 7 of them are going to deliberate, the other couple are sort of on standby. Even if a couple of the older ones come in, we're still going to have that information from the younger people who are more tech savvy. And then you have only one person that's alive, because she did try to bring in Depp's deceased security guy, and would say that, oh, he saw this too, that he's gone. He can't testify. The only time that we get to hear from him is outside of court, listening to some of the unedited audio, because they wouldn't let any of the audio that wasn't just Depp and Heard in, because it was like secretly recorded. They didn't know they were being recorded. They didn't give permission to be recorded, that sort of thing. So only the parties as part of this were allowed to be heard. But you hear him talking about letting her believe whatever she wants. He just wants to get her back away from Depp, that sort of thing, after the Australia incident. And she talks about really grievous injuries that, even if you believe that the medical team that Depp had that came after the Australia incident were completely biased against her and hated her and wanted nothing to do with her except to isolate her, whatever. Very grievous injuries that they would have noticed and commented on, even if it was just to say something snide when she's not in the room, because when they're recording, she's going in and out. You can hear her walking around. I'm not going to get into the details of the injuries, because it's gruesome what she's talking about, and the fact that she and her friends would talk about how she was getting isolated, but after the Australia incident, she was sent back to LA to be with her friend group, be with her social support. Her friends were allowed to live rent free in the penthouses all around Amber, so she was constantly surrounded by friends. And the only other person that has witnessed her alleged physical abuse from Depp had a different testimony from her. And it was her sister. Her sister is on her side, has been on her side since the beginning. And when she talked about the incident on the staircase, it was completely different from Amber's, which was completely different from Depp's, which was slightly different from the security guy that was there. And that's telling. And Amber Heard has told some of these stories like up to 5 different times. Like, okay, we know Depp lost a finger in the Australia incident. How did he lose it? He initially claimed that he closed an accordion door. He later would text people the time I cut off my finger, etc., etc. I mean, we have that where someone may hurt their foot really badly because, I don't know, they hurt their foot really badly because it got shut in the door by someone on accident. Well, the time I hurt my foot. Duh. That's just straightforward. I discount it. Anyway, so he goes from accordion door to Amber Heard smashed it with a bottle of vodka that had a handle. And that's kind of been his testimony since he changed his tune, so to speak. Amber has been anything from punching a wall, punching a phone with that a piece broke off, a porcelain piece that he then cut it off with, or a knife, or a shard of glass, to punching a different phone, or smashing a phone over and over again, to now it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what he did. I wasn't present mentally, physically, something, this 3-day hostage situation, he just cut it off at some point. So she's constantly changing her story. She's constantly doing that. And that's why I don't believe her. And I get so frustrated when I go online and I'm seeing people, well, anyone just bad mouthing how anyone looks. I hate that. And people talking about Johnny Depp's sunglasses when they are tinted glasses, partially because he's blind. And light sensitivity is a thing, and he always wears them. If they were a problem, if the court found them offensive, he wouldn't be wearing them constantly. In some cases, he'll take them off, but he's like legally blind. He can't see more than a few inches in front of his face, only out of one eye. And people shaming the lawyers for doing their jobs. I really hate seeing that. I see people saying, I hate Camille Vasquez. God damn it, Elaine's got me doing it. And they're saying they hate Camille because she's doing her job and she's doing it effectively. I don't care what side you're on, she's doing a good job with handling Amber and reining her in, because Amber can go off, and she did that with her own lawyer, Elaine. She just stopped listening to Elaine during her redirect, her initial redirect. And then I think that's why they had Mr. Rottenborn take over for the the rebuttal, everything. And then they also have been saying shit about Elaine. But then there's the people that are making death threats or saying that people... Okay, so there was one person that their name was like Stone Butch or something, I don't know. But they had Butch in their URL, and they were saying bullshit, and I told them they were saying bullshit, and I said they were giving a bad name to Butches. And then they did this, oh, are you a Tumblr trans or a real trans? And it's just like, I didn't even take away the fact that you're calling yourself a Butch. You're just being a shitty version of a Butch. Apparently, by the way, if you've been under the knife, you're a more visible trans person, so throwing that out there. Apparently. So seeing all of that, and I mostly see Johnny Depp defenders giving snide remarks very publicly, but I don't see anyone talking about, and this is in my own personal experience, my own personal spears. I'm not going into the anti-tags. I'm just looking at the main ones. And I don't see Depp defenders saying that all these individual people should go break their legs to understand what disability is, or should be assaulted, or should have this or that happen to them. It's I don't know. It's interesting, and these are my thoughts that have been going on while I've been watching this case. So I wanted to share them. I wanted to get them out, especially because we have closing tomorrow and the jury's going to start deliberating. And my prediction for what's going to happen is closing statement is going to reiterate on Depp's side about the fact that Heard has been lying. She has lied several times on the stand, including in the UK. She has duplicated photos that are very obviously duplicates in a variety of different ways. She didn't hand over the metadata. She has exaggerated and changed her story multiple times, and she's on tape so many times taunting Johnny. And I really hope they close it with the recording of "Tell the world, Johnny. Tell the world that you are a victim of abuse or domestic abuse or something." That sort of thing. I want them to end on that. And I think on her side, they're going to talk about how she is a victim of DV that has been dragged through the courts so many times and had her name dragged through the mud. And she's been a victim of public opinion being turned against her, that Johnny has constantly pulled all the stops out to go against her, that sort of thing. And it's her First Amendment right for her to be able to talk about what's happened to her, that sort of thing. And then I think the jury's going to come back and they're going to drop her countersuit, and I think they're going to find Depp to like $7 million. I think they're going to make him whole. And that's if they don't dismiss it outright for both of them for wasting their time. But yeah, that's my prediction. Those are my thoughts. It feels like there's so much overlap with how transgenderphobia is treated merely as a term, that it boggles my mind to see these circles happen over and over. The asexuality, the transgenderphobia, now male domestic violence, and what's going to be next? Are we going to go back into crippled discourse? Because I'd really like to not go back into crippled discourse. I still have so much to say about that shit, but that's going to take months. Anyway, I know I keep saying I'm going to do the next chapter of Whipping Girl, but I'm actually going to record the next chapter of Whipping Girl today or tomorrow, so it'll be out next week, next Wednesday by the latest. So, thank y'all for listening, if you did actually listen to this, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.